Hi, welcome to the next episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine. I am Laura Joseph from Healing with Spirit. I am your host. This is where we have real talk. We address the elephant in the room to the growing sickness in our society. We address root issues and provide sustainable solutions. We hope by addressing the intersectionality and connect the dots like the web of so many of society's challenges, we can help others understand the trauma infection that impacts all areas of our life: addiction, domestic violence, racism, homelessness, sexual abuse, chronic health issues, cancer, environmental, climate change, and more, and including today on clutter. And today in this collaborative program, we hope to share a new perspective of solutions, healing, and resolutions. And with each episode, we address a certain trigger while offering the spiritual medicine with at least 3 tips or actionable steps that our listeners can take and implement. Please consider becoming a Patreon supporter to help support this podcast and our social justice initiatives. And don't forget to please share, like, engage, follow. And today's guest, I am so excited, is Judy Granlee Gates. Judy is a 4th-generation small business owner and multi-vocational woman. She just came out with an amazing book called Bigger Living, Smaller Space, Resizing for a Clean and Cozy Home. She just came out with this book. It's amazing. The reviews that are coming in with this book are fantastic. And Judy, would you please just share about your background with folks?
Sure. I am a home builder and remodeler of 34 years. And I also happen to have a bachelor's degree in education, training, and development, which I have used throughout my years as a home builder, teaching people the process, leading people through. We build a little bit differently than some other builders. We're pretty hands-on, and we have a very intensive process we go through with people when they build, from the time we start talking to them about the living space they want, the environment they want to create, until the home is finished and beyond. Done that for the last, like I said, 34 years. We've won many local, national, and state awards, and I've met thousands of people in that process that come to me generally saying they just need a few hundred more square feet and their house would be perfect, or a little bigger home and their life would be perfect.
And when you hear that, what is it, because they have too much stuff, or is it just because maybe they just have a really small space?
You know, most people don't have a really small space in America. Even smaller homes aren't small. I think the national average for the home size is close to 3,000 square feet. Where I am, it certainly is. And initially, I just thought it was the American dream. People wanted a bigger, better home, right? It's keeping up with the Joneses. It's having, this dream goal of this big, beautiful house. But over the years, I started seeing a pattern emerging where people were just saying, we're just outgrowing the space we're in. But they were living in a 2,500 or 3,000 square foot house in most cases, if not 2,000, which should be plenty of room for a family of 4. And so
that would be considered an extraordinarily large house. You got houses in Massachusetts that are about 600 to 900 square feet.
Okay.
So the average house in Massachusetts is probably about 1,500. A 3,000 square foot house would be pretty large in Massachusetts.
So regional differences definitely play in. And I know on the West Coast, homes are pretty large. And we also have a newer, I like to say the West Coast is newer. That's not a positive or a negative.
That plays into, because like New England, the houses are historic. So the rooms are smaller.
Yes.
The houses are smaller.
Yes. And then I think that creates a climate of, oh, well, this is the norm of what we build here, right? So people in your area probably aren't building as big a house as they are maybe in my area. In some older neighborhoods in communities around me that maybe were built around the 1920s or the 1900s, which is considered old in the Seattle market, those are smaller homes. Those could be under 1,000 square feet, but we tend to see on average about a 2,000 square foot house on up. That's not uncommon in my marketplace, even for homes that might have been built in the 50s or 60s. But again, we are a newer build market, so we do have bigger square footages as an average.
What do you find to be the biggest things that folks are challenged with? What are their biggest triggers, or what are you noticing?
Well, people always come in and they just need a little more space. And if we're doing a remodel, and we always do a site visit and look at their home. So it's really, the tell is there. You walk in and you can see exactly what their problems are. And I have walked into homes that have things piled floor to ceiling, no visible counter space. And the homeowner tells me, if this was 200 to 300 square feet bigger, I think we'd be just fine. And this would be totally different. But I've come to realize that that's not really true. People don't understand the role that clutter plays in eating up their real estate, and many other things, the emotional impact and physical impact it can have on you. There are even huge studies linking clutter to many health conditions. So there's a lot of things people aren't thinking about. And their quick answer is, let's just get more space. And I don't think that's the solution for most people.
So, yeah, I mean, so how did you go from working like in construction, seeing this, to saying, like, I'm going to write a book? Like, what was that trigger?
Well,
Like, what triggered you to finally say, you know what, I need to write a book on this?
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a book, but it kind of came from a mix of family and personal situations and my work. So years ago, my grandma, who I adored, had to downsize from her home of 50 years and go to a senior apartment. That was her first move. And she didn't really want to, but she agreed. And she agreed reluctantly. And so that process of going through 50 years of possessions, and this was the Depression era woman. So she kept wrapping paper and bows and you name it, she kept it. There's a lot of stories about Fran in the book and the things she kept.
I'm going through that now, downsizing, being in my 50s, going from a 2,600 square foot home to about 1,100 square feet. So I'm going through like stuff that you go, oh, because it's memories, right? Or it's,
so you can relate.
Yeah. And it's so hard downsizing for seniors, or even like, I guess I'm at that bracket. I'm not quite there, but I am,
and that's, I call it resizing, because downsizing to me is just moving to a smaller house without a lot of thought. Resizing is being really thoughtful about it. So after I did this with my grandma, I kind of it became like a thing. People came to me and said, hey, would you help our family with this? Right. So I ended up doing it many, many times. And the thing I learned is that when I kind of knew this, but became painfully obvious during helping other people, when people are forced to do anything, they grasp tighter. So all those things my grandma didn't really want to get rid of became even harder for her to let go of, because she was being forced. So this natural reaction to hang on becomes really panicky. And I did that many times with other family members. My father.
That is so true. That is so, I just want to highlight that, because I think, doing the work that I do, working with trauma survivors, but even in my own story, I said, this is the hardest move ever, because I really didn't want to move.
Yes.
And I agree. And I said, geez, if it was only because I wanted to, I know I probably wouldn't be struggling with what to get rid of and what to let go of. Right.
Yeah. So fear makes us hang on. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I recognize that fear makes us hang on to old patterns, old behaviors, and even old things. So I noticed all of these things going on. I work with, I meet a couple hundred people a year, and we only do 6 jobs. So I hear this over and over from people about how they just have too much stuff and they don't have enough room, but no one ever talks about getting rid of any of that stuff. And so the idea for the book really came from a combination of those two factors, of listening to people saying, I don't have enough space, and then also seeing people who needed to move or even wanted to move, but then had a really hard time processing all the stuff. So about 6 years ago, our daughter was a senior in high school, 7 years ago, and we knew she was going to be going to college. And we lived in a 3,400 square foot house. We had already downsized from over 4,000. And I thought to myself one day, for some reason, when my daughter's gone, we are going to be living in this big house, my husband and I. We only live on one floor. There's 3 stories, and we only use maybe 1,500 square feet of the house. And so we started talking about it, having gone through all of this with our families. And a lot of our relatives had passed. Our grandparents, we only have one mom between us. My husband's mom is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But we had lost all these relatives. And you know what that means? All their stuff comes to your house to live forever, right? And I'm the family historian. I'm the keeper of all things Nelson on my mom's side of the family. And so they ended up with me. And we
And
looked at
some of it's pattern too, because I mean,
yes,
like I was conditioned, this was your grandfather, so this stays in the family, right? This was your
correct,
grandmother's, it needs to stay in the family. And before
correct.
you know it, you're more of a collector now
Yeah.
versus,
And if you ask anyone in the family, hey, look at this item, whose was it? I don't know, and I don't care, right? So I had all these kinds of things. So we actually decided we would build a small house and move into it. As builders, we move a lot. The longest we've lived anywhere is 12 years.
Mm.
And the shortest we've lived anywhere is 2 years. But builders tend to move a lot. So we were like, okay, let's build a new house and let's build it really small and see if we can do it. Because when we started out married 35 years ago, we lived in a small house. We lived in like a 400 square foot house, a little studio. Then we thought we were really on the Ritz. We moved to an 1,100 square foot house, and we just kept moving to bigger homes. And so we thought, let's try it and see. And it's actually, we gave away, donated, sold most of everything we owned, including many of our sentimental, you can never get rid of this because it was grandpa's things. And we've never had a house we enjoyed more. And we are very happy here. Less maintenance, less upkeep, less expense. There's so many financial and emotional and freedom benefits to living smaller that I decided to write the book about the process that I use and a lot of the benefits.
So, okay. Yeah, I'm just like sitting with this for a second because this is like you just said it was pretty big, and it's funny because I even watched this woman on TikTok who she goes into these homes that are really bad that would technically be condemned
Yeah,
because
hoarders.
because the hoarders are so bad.
Yeah.
And like my mother became more of a collector, but then she became a hoarder, not by choice, but because there was actually an illness with dementia.
Right.
And then she would forget, and then she'd buy something over and over. Like I found DVDs that she had 3 and 4 copies of,
Yes.
of the same thing,
Yeah.
And I think it like goes into like there's such the intersectionality of like, where is this really rooted, right? And so when you see this as a builder from that lens, right? What was some of your ways of challenging some of the homeowners that it really wasn't a bigger space issue, it was a declutter issue?
I always tell people budget always plays a part in any building project, right? People have X number of dollars and they want certain things for that. And generally no one comes in with a budget that's generous enough to tick off all the boxes. It's Murphy's Law. It's how it works. And so when people would come in and say, well, we really need this space because one story that I just love, we had a client that wanted to build 2 separate kitchens, 2 complete kitchens and living rooms. So in their basement, they wanted a full kitchen, huge living room for parties to watch football because they were big Seahawk fans. Well, that's awesome, but you can do that in your living room, right? If you made your living room and kitchen area a little bit bigger, you wouldn't need double those. And kitchens are the most expensive square footage in the house. So when I presented to them that they were about $100,000 short on their budget to get that, and by the way, that $100,000 was all in that extra kitchen and living space. And if we did away with that, we would actually be under budget. The clients actually decided not to build the project because they couldn't have the second kitchen and living room, which I thought was amazingly American, I will say. It's crazy what people think they need in a house. And, people will say, well, I need a dining room that seats 20. Oh, do you eat in your dining room every day with 19 other people? Well, no, but we host Christmas every year. So we're going to build a dining room that seats 20 people for one day of the year in your house. And when you do the math on the square footage and you say, that's what this room is costing you, oftentimes reasonable people will say, that's a lot of money. We'd never thought of it like that. And you're right. There's a better way to do this. And I can give
I
people
love how you just
options.
frame that. Like, because I just know even for myself, like I go, well, I want a bigger space because I just went through opening up a new office, right? Moved my office, and part of it played in was being able to host events.
Yeah.
And, and I said, well, originally I was going to, if I didn't have to move out of my house, I would just do it there.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have to get a new office space. And then I said, well, no. And then I go, well, but if I have it here, and then it's like, we do all these, I need a bigger room because so I can hold more people. Right.
Yes.
And yeah, that's good and dandy, but you're right. Like, how often do you do it, and does the cost justify?
Correct. The one that we always see is a balcony off of the primary suite. If there's a balcony off the primary suite, people lose their minds. And we did a project one time for a real estate agent couple, and they wanted this little balcony. So it was going to be 8 feet long and 4 feet deep. Now that's not very big, right? You could get a chair out there and read the paper. And I remember the husband vividly saying, I'm going to sit out here and drink because they lived on the water. I'm going to sit out here in the morning. I'm going to drink my coffee. I'm going to read a book. Well, a few years later, we went back to their house to look at a different project for them. And I looked at the man who I knew well, and I said, Gary, how many days have you sat out on that balcony and drank your coffee and read a paper or a book? And he said, I never have. And he said, and the funny thing is he says, when we're selling houses, we always hear people say what I said. Oh, I'm going to sit out here every morning. And no one does. So it's a selling feature, but no one ever uses it. And it probably added at that point $15,000 to the price of their budget. And they never used it one time. And you want to know the irony? We went back and took it off and put in windows. They paid to have it built, and then they paid to have it go away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So tell me, like, if you can share maybe one story or something as far as like a process when it comes to the resizing, like take me through what that looks like. I mean, I just know sometimes I go, like, I'm going through a closet right now, going from closet that I had, I go one walk-in closet, and that really isn't that big. It's maybe 5 feet long, and it's one wall so it's not that big. But where I'm moving into, those clothes are taking up 3 closets.
Yeah. And what I know from moving from a bigger house to a smaller house is, even if you really prepare, you're still not prepared. You move in and go, what the hell was I thinking? Why did I bring this? So my process is, whether you're just doing a space or a whole house, it's the same. So let's say you have a closet that you're needing to tackle. I tell everyone, empty the whole thing out. Empty it all. Put it all on the bed and the floor, whatever. Just empty the whole thing out. And then the only things that go back in are the things that you're keeping and that you love, right? I don't want to get Marie Kondo on you. Not everything has to bring you joy. My toilet brush does not bring me joy, but I need it. So I put everything out. And as I touch it, I really look at it and think about, am I going to wear this again? Do I need this? Did I even know I had this? Are there still tags on this item that I have never worn? When did I buy it? How many times have I hung it up and said, oh, I'm sure I'll wear it this season? There's things we hang on to for sentimental and nostalgic reasons. There's things we hang on to because of money. We spent money on it and we feel guilty just getting rid of it. But I really do try to look at
I'm guilty of that one.
I totally am. But I always tell people, memories are portable, right? So memories don't go with an item. When I was a little girl, my grandpa had a shaving mug. You probably remember those. Looked like a brush and coffee mug. And he would lather up his face, and he had the old crank razor that you twisted the bottom and then you lifted the old straight blade out, right? He would shave and I would stand there and watch him. And then he would take the blade out and then lather my face up, and I would get to shave. And when he died, my grandma offered me the shaving mug. My grandpa didn't have a lot of possessions, and I passed on it. And for a few years, I really felt sad that I did that. But then one day I realized, I don't have that shaving mug, but I still have that memory of shaving with my grandpa. And I can go back to that minute so quickly in my head. I can smell the shaving soap. I can see the lather. I can hear the giggles. I don't need the shaving mug to do that. And I think once people get across that bridge, because that really is the divide there, like the item, the memory. Once people realize that they are connected, but they aren't interconnected, that is where people can make progress in letting go of things. I think that's the hard part for people. So if you're emptying out a whole closet or a room or whatever, and you're sorting things, I generally have 4 bins, the 4 G's, I call them: get, give, go, and guilt. And, something might go in the guilt bin, because it's like, oh, this is my grandma's thing and I can't get rid of it because it was so important to her. And you process these things into bins: things you're donating, things you're giving to someone else, things that you may store, which I try to limit because storage can become a whole problem of its own. And then the guilt items. The guilt items are the sentimental things that are the hardest for people. And some people need to process those separately. Like they just need to put them all in a box as they go and then deal with them. And so I give lots of leeway there, but that's my suggestion, is to process them that way. As soon as you have all the items you're not keeping, get them out of the house. If your friend Carol wants these certain items, she needs to come get them within 2 days, or you need to drop them off, or they leave, because that's how we slow ourselves down, by not taking those items to the donation center, by not getting that item to Carol's house. That just keeps us in the perpetual chaos, right? So that's kind of my process.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that, and I like the guilt bin, because I know what I did is I put some stuff in storage as my things that I can't process right now, losing 2 parents in a year and post-divorce and everything else, and multi-layered. And I just said, I worked at getting rid of most of the stuff. I said, the stuff I just don't have the bandwidth right now to process, I just put in a storage unit, because it all has to go anyway. So, I need to put it in a storage unit. And then what I'm doing is I'm dedicating one day, either a week or a month, as I titrate down as to my day to go in there and process and read it more.
And when my father-in-law died, my mother-in-law was not mentally prepared or emotionally able to process his personal items. And so she left their home and had an auction and sold everything. We didn't even talk about his things. If we pulled something out that was his, it went into a purple bin. We bought purple bins. The purple bins were not to be touched. They were non-negotiable. Anything that went in there was something my mother-in-law could not deal with right then and there. She just didn't have the capacity. And she dealt with it about 6 years, 7 years later. She still has 2 or 3 bins. There were probably 10. She's down to probably 2 or 3. And those, she said, will be dealt with when she's gone. They're just the final things she can't manage. And that's okay. There's some things that are really painful for people, but the rest, don't let one group of items stop the entire process.
I like the fact that you said even color-coded bins, right? And I liked even just certain boxes, and like I've been trying to figure out how to, I had like a walk-in closet. So my shoes were even hung and they were underneath, in the closet. Well, where I'm moving to, there's no place for my shoes, actually. So, and I'm finding what I found to organize that was, when I go to Costco every time, we get those fruit boxes, they actually slide nice and easy underneath the bed. And I put my shoes in there. And then I have like my ones I wear every day, and like my casual shoes, so each one, I know when I pull it out, I know which one I'm pulling out,
You do have to get creative when you live in a small space. There's lots of tricks to it, but there is a little bit of creativity needed when you do live small.
What are some of the things you notice with small spaces that you would recommend for folks?
I went from a closet that was bigger in my primary suite than most people's bedrooms, secondary bedrooms. And I have a 5x5 walk-in closet now, and I share it with my husband. And so one of the things that I do is I rotate my clothes. So my out of season clothes, you might have 4 seasons on the East Coast. On the West Coast, we really have kind of 2. In Seattle, we have raining and not raining. And we don't really have usually a glorious spring or fall. We kind of have just two seasons, cold and warm. So I'm able to just split my wardrobe into two, and I have kind of a rolling rack that I can bring to the front door, swap the clothes and shoes out, and then it has a big zippered cover on it, and I can roll it into the garage and store it in a corner. I'm not a big proponent of paying for storage. So I encourage people to limit what they have where they can, but some people have to have storage and have to pay for storage. But
unfortunately, in New England, it's a challenge because we seriously lack, like the closets we're talking about here are literally like,
oh, I know. I have friends in New York,
1 or 2 feet deep and like 2 feet wide, and that's it.
You don't have walk. It's the old home factor. When I visited my friend in New York, I was just like, oh my gosh. And she was like, help me make this better. And I'm like, we need a remodeler because those closets are tiny. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be 3 tips that you would recommend folks of where they could do to, like, either if they're resizing or just decluttering?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the tips? What are 3 things that they could do today to start some of those very difficult tasks?
There are some really great books on the market aside from mine, but that talk about clutter and the mindset of letting go. The first thing I really encourage people to do is really think carefully about their possessions and how do they want to live. I say control your possessions before they control you, right? Control your stuff, or in the end, it will control you. I'm a big proponent of downsizing earlier in life, why I call it right sizing, resizing, do that sooner so you can enjoy a little bit more of that freedom and you're not leaving that to your kids. So think about that. You've got a lot of stuff. Do you really need to hang on to all of it? And how's that going to impact your children when you go, or whoever's going to inherit your mess? I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about it that way, it begins that process of mindset shift. The second thing is just to start somewhere. Now, that sounds trite, but pick a space. We all have a room in our house that I call a crap catcher. There's a room that the door is almost always closed to, right? And even me, I have rooms that get a little out of control, and I just have to, rein them back in periodically. And as I do, I have to say, do I really need some of this? But pick a space, whether it's a closet, a countertop, a drawer, I don't care. Pick something. And I love a task timer that you can use your phone too, but I have a task timer. I flip it to the number of minutes that I have to spend. And then I can just go about, dig in. When the timer goes off, I have the freedom to quit, or I might be inspired and say, I'm going to do another drawer, or I'm going to do another 15 minutes. So start somewhere. That's the second one. And the third one is really something that a lot of us aren't good at, and that's asking for help. So sometimes an accountability partner, whether they're there with you or whether they're just someone you're checking in with. Hey, I'm going to do this week. Would you check in with me on Saturday and see how that went? Now, for me,
that was a big one for me.
Big one.
Because I did two parents closing up an office, moving everything by myself during the pandemic. And I just got to the point where I can't do this anymore by myself.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's exhausting. And so I think for me, if I tell someone I'm going to do something, that's my word. I take that very seriously. I don't like to go back on that. And so if I say something and I tell my friend, hey, check in with me on Saturday, I'm going to have this done, or I'm going to at least have it started, then I have someone that I do have to be accountable to. For some of us, I noticed in the people that I've helped, the overwhelm just becomes like a second guessing thing. People aren't able to articulate or differentiate in their own mind. The last person that I helped downsize to a much smaller home, she lived in a very small home, but it was pretty full. And she was going from 1,000 feet to about 700, but the kitchen was half the size. It was tiny. So when we would look at things, she would say things like, well, I do use a turkey baster at Thanksgiving. Yep, you do. Are you going to cook Thanksgiving dinner out of your new home? Well, no, I'm probably going to go to the kids' house, aren't I? Yeah, you probably are. Now, and if you didn't, could we get a turkey baster at the dollar store or from the neighbor? Yes, we could. So sometimes people just need like almost the voice of reason in their ear to know they're doing the right thing. And so I think having a buddy or an accountability partner is huge. So those are the 3 tips I would recommend to people.
And I think that last one's important because one of the things I see, at least here in my neck of the woods, is we lack community.
We
So
totally do.
And I think the fear of I'm holding on, because I know I've been doing it, is I'm holding on to this because I don't really know this person. I don't know that person. And I think, I did grow up in a neighborhood where we knew everybody. And if I didn't have something, we would go to my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
But something has shifted in recent years where we really don't know anybody.
Right. We don't.
And it's like, if we just got back to community, got to know our neighbors again and start build relationships with our neighbors,
yeah,
then we would all have less stuff and we would just be borrowing it from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's communities that have lending libraries of things like tools. So people in Seattle, there's a big lending library that's a tool workshop. And you can go there and borrow, like a library, check out a skill saw, check out a hammer, check out a drill. And then you bring it back just like you borrowed a book. And it brings neighbors to meet each other. It's great. I think the second thing about like an accountability partner that's really important is it is community, but also there's a great way to set that up because people often don't like to ask. What I see is they don't want to be indebted to someone. So we all have projects we need help with. So say to a friend, I really need help with my guest room. It's out of control. I can't see the bed. The closet is, I'm afraid to open the door because something's going to hit me on the head. How about one Saturday, Sunday, whatever, we go through my guest room together. And then what project do you have at your house that you could use my help with for a day? Do you need to reorganize your kitchen? Is your garage a disaster? Can you use help with laundry? Whatever it is, there's sort of I help you, then you help me. You get 2 benefits out of that. You get the work done and you get to spend time with someone you really enjoy.
And I think that is a very good recommendation because I think sometimes people even say no to their friends.
Yes.
Even when asked, because they got so much stuff going on in their life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, I can't make space for you. And it's like, well, if we just make space, I'll make space for you. You help me with this and I make space for you on your project. And then we hit 2 birds with 1 stone. And not only that, but we're building a relationship. I mean, this is something, right? Pre going back to the days, especially with women, right?
Well, think of the barn raisings.
Yeah.
Right? The old Amish barn raisings. When one Amish family built a barn, every family from miles around came and helped. It wasn't even a question of whether you were going to. You just did. You got in your wagon and you went over there. And it's really no different.
I was just going to even correlate it to the invention of washing machines, where before women used to gather in communities and wash clothes together, because that's where we did all the gossip and all the talk and everything else. And then everybody was watching each other's children at the same time. And then wash machines came about, and then it took us away from community.
Yeah.
So it's trying to remember. I think we have a huge remembering to go back to, but this is fabulous. And how would people be able to find you? What would be the best way for folks to find you?
My website, judygranleegates.com. There's some good information there, different tips. I'm busy putting more on. I do a monthly newsletter. And if you'd like to sign up for that, I only contact you once a month with a newsletter that actually gives you tips. No spammy, look at this. So those are the 2. That's the best way to get me is judygranleegates.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and I have an interactive group on Facebook that's called Declutter and Resize, and it's the same on Instagram.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for joining. And if you like today's episode, be sure to follow, like, comment, engage, please share. And until next time, we'll see you, Triggers. Thank you and have a great day. Happy Triggers and Spiritual Medicine. And there we go, botching that one in the end. There.